So hi everyone, I am going to present something about cookies, but we've had a bit of a last minute change as well, where on Twitter, me and Till were just chatting about the session, and I think he will jump on and talk about something cookie related as well. So what I will do is I will run through my slides relatively quickly, hopefully in about 10 minutes. And then hopefully we can have a little bit more of a discussion and maybe people can ask questions and, oh, okay, take my time, fine. Well, I will not then cut the slides short, but I am hoping not minutes so that we can have a little bit of a discussion, and I would be very keen to hear other people's experience with cookie consent implementation as well. I found it challenging in many ways, so it would be really great to hear what other people have experienced, if it was similar to mine, or maybe my problems were just not happening to anyone else. So it would be great to have the idea. Without then much more delay, if I will start on the slides. So this is the placeholder slide. Of course, I don't know on which side of me it is. You can see that I had some fun with the memes. But to start with the introduction, I obviously have to click the right tab. This is my own experience, so not reflecting on my employer, and also I am an analyst, so I am an analyst, but I also implement these cookie consent managers. So this is my personal experience and doesn't have to match anyone else. And I deal specifically most of the time with the tags. That is what caused majority of the issues that I have seen and experienced from my clients. And also, yeah, the benefit of being a consultant is that I receive lots of questions from various parts and various businesses. And this presentation is based on the questions and issues that I have seen clients make when implementing a consent manager. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a background of why I think the consent managers became just so popular. And this is because obviously GDPR, everyone knows. GDPR is the regulation that is making sure that if a personal information is collected, then at least via cookies, then the cookie pop-up needs to be shown. And it actually resulted in a little bit clearer website tracking policies. So that was something that I actually found beneficial. Then in May, there was another update to the GDPR policy, and that specifically said that you need to allow users to opt out of cookie tracking if they wanted to. And that resulted in very different levels of tracking. So now you say, oh, I agree to marketing, I don't agree to marketing, I agree to being tracked just with Google Analytics, I don't agree to being tracked. I mean, it was earlier as well, but I've seen that there was a surge of those requests coming after that May update in particular. And cookie managers alleviate quite a big need for managing quite a lot of complex systems. So I feel that this is something that they really fit a need, where they just take that responsibility and complexity and take it upon themselves, manage the scale, giving peace of mind to people who use third parties to manage their cookies. So again, as a consultant, I have a lot of questions coming from various clients, and these are the kind of questions that I was asked. So, for example, US traffic dropped significantly after we've implemented Consent Manager. What is wrong? Direct traffic increased, but all other channels dropped. Again, what happened with the Consent Manager? Or direct traffic increased, but only PPC traffic dropped. Or my email campaigns don't perform quite as well. Is it just that people are not opting in? What's going on here? Some people compare the number of clicks in their advertising systems to the number of sessions that resulted as from those clicks, to have that ratio and make sure that they're not losing money on clicks that don't actually get to the website. So sometimes there's questions around that. And others asked that They see the tags firing, but advertising tags are firing even though everything was blocked in GTM. So this is another type of question that I received. And so analyzing these questions that I had, I came across 3 main business decisions that are made when implementing a consent manager. For example, decisions that are made when planning. One of them is we will allow users to browse our website without making a selection on the consent manager. I mean, in theory, it's a sound decision. It gives the users an option to not accept the cookies and not be tracked if they didn't want to. They will fire tags on the next page after the user has made their selection. That is another decision that many companies have made, because they say, okay, user has given us consent. At this point, next page, we will track him as it allows. In theory, also, not a bad option. And the next one, we will rely on the provider to tell us what happens in different locations and determine what behavior the consent manager is showing. And those decisions that are made in the planning phase have some unexpected tracking consequences. So those decisions, going back to the questions that I was asked, of all these questions, 3, mainly of the channel discrepancy and channel changes post consent manager implementation, were actually related to only one of these business decisions that was made at the planning stage, which was we will allow users to move through the website without being tracked. What happens in this particular case? We just keep the banner at the bottom of the website saying, okay, if you allow us to, the banner of cookie banner, if you want to be tracked, click yes. If you don't want to click track, opt out. But if we do that and allow users to move through the website without making a choice on the very first page, this is what happens. User lands on the page, no tags are firing, because that is the idea of consent implementation. The banner is shown, user sees the banner, some users choose not to interact with it. User moves to the page 2. The banner becomes a little bit annoying, and so they decide, okay, I will accept my tracking cookies. And we have page 3. People are browsing as usual, when you think, well, great, at least we have half of the tracking for that session. One issue with that, UTM parameters are on the landing page, and so many times did that happen that users, that analysts were seeing, oh, we have this traffic that's, is from a direct channel. What is going on? Well, they actually came from somewhere else, but your tracking parameters are on the landing page. They don't normally persist unless you put something in place to do so, which isn't very often considered. So in this particular case, the decision to allow users to move through the website without being tracked meant that the landing page parameters were lost. And in order to prevent that, you can make sure that users choose on the first page. So do not allow them to browse throughout the website without making that selection, unless you are willing to take the risks. Or you can preserve those tracking parameters until they actually make their opt-in. That is another alternative. So that said, like I said, the fact that user was able to move through the journey without making a selection caused the traffic channels to be attributed differently and make changes. So another question was, I used to have a 50% ratio of my clicks from the advertising system to my display activity, but now it's only 10% of clicks that end in sessions. What is going on? And this is actually the most common issue that I have seen happen with consent implementation. So that goes back to the decision made at the planning stage. We will fire tags on the next page after the user made their selection. What happens in this case, I guess you are probably going to know, is that user lands on the page, the tags don't fire, the banner is shown, User makes a choice, but the tags still don't fire until the next page. So we are on page 2 and the tags fire as normal. So I'm pretty sure that you know now what is going to happen. UTM parameters are lost again because they are on the landing page. So unless you fire your page view upon the click of a button, yes, I accept my tracking cookies, you will not collect that URL parameter on your landing page. Your landing page will become the second page because that's the first time that the page view tag is fired. And so that will not allow the analytics system to attribute the sessions to the correct channels and will change your channel grouping. So going back to those decisions that are made at the planning stage, the firing tags on the next page after the user made this selection instead of on the click of a button, that means again that you lose your landing page tracking parameters in some cases. Fire your page view tag on click of the button and not on the next page. That is the best solution for that. So those two common issues that are related specifically to losing the landing page tracking parameters have resulted in a bunch of questions. Not compliant, till I will let you talk about this later. I'm not sure what you mean. So yeah, those tracking, the UTM parameters were responsible for majority of the questions that I received from clients regarding their consent implementation and the following channel changes. Now, going to the my US traffic dropped significantly since we implemented Consent Manager. What is wrong? That is another example of a question that I received. And that goes back to the decision of relying on the provider to determine the behavior of the Consent Manager in different locations. And it's not quite as easy as I say it, because it really depends on the technical setup and it will only apply in certain cases. In this particular case, people have not ensured that the relevant tracking fires as expected in another location. So they had different data layer variables surfaced basically in the EU and in the countries that don't require consent. And what happened was that they checked all the implementation for the EU, and that was working just fine. But the problem is that variable on which everything was based, all the consent managed behavior was based, was different outside of the EU. Because the users didn't require to opt in or opt out, that variables was set to false, which is the equivalent of EU users not agreeing to being tracked. So that's why the US behavior was not tracked. And so that's why the most important is to actually use VPN to log in from other location and make sure that you do check the behavior of your consent manager and your tags in places that are not necessarily the one that you are configuring the consent manager for. So ensure that triggers work in the EU and outside. And if you rely on any variables surfaced in the data layer, just make sure that you have checked all of the locations that were that are available, or options at least, to make sure that it works correctly. And if you are using blocking triggers in your tag managing solution, just make sure that it doesn't block the traffic from locations where user consent is not required. So you can rely on providers to determine what to do with the consent. That is their job, but just make sure that your particular configuration, you've checked not just what you are actually implementing, but also other countries. And so from these questions that I was asked, we've already covered these by losing the UTM parameters. And I've just explained that relying on the provider to choose locations is good, but just make sure that it actually works everywhere. And then the last question remaining is that people were still seeing tax firing, even though they were blocked in GTM. So they were using, in this particular case, GTM, but it would go also for other tag manager solutions. And so if you do that, if you see those tags firing, well, they could be hard-coded. Make sure to have a chat with the developers, or maybe use 2 tag manager solutions. There may be lots of other issues that could be caused, but make sure that you don't focus on one tag management solution. Just check everything is as you'd expect. And so we've gone through majority of the questions that I was asked by my clients. Those were coming down to 3 main issues and decisions made at the planning stage, like I have mentioned. And this is my favorite cookie consent manager, and this is a placeholder to look at time. I see there's quite a lot of comments in the chat, so what I will do is I will stop presenting and I will let people jump in and talk about it, because I'm quite curious how everyone feels about this topic. What other issues you experienced? Yeah, local storage is very different. I will definitely finish my presentation now and let Till come in as well, because I see that he has some opinions about this and I'm very curious to listen. Christina, maybe you can bring Till.
Activate your camera. Yeah.
Hi, Monika. It was more referring to Jigit than your presentation. I didn't want to interrupt you because I really liked what you showed there. Sorry. I just wanted to what you mentioned before is quite right. If you don't fire the triggering directly after the consent, or perhaps you reload your page after consent, then you're raising your direct traffic a lot, or your internal traffic a lot, not the direct traffic, your internal traffic. And the idea of storing information in session storage or local storage could be a way, but in the end it is not compliant, because, and that's I think the typical problem with the cookie consent. We're talking about cookie consent, but it's not about a cookie. It is about creating user profiles, and creating a user profile means cookie, local storage, session storage, whatever is in there. So, and again, not a legal advice. I'm not a legal, I'm not a lawyer. I just get my own opinion there and talk to a lot of DPOs. But from what I got, it is always about creating a profile. And if you use local storage, session storage, a cookie, IndexedDB, whatever the browser gives you as opportunity to save something about the user, you're creating the first run a profile. And this is not allowed without an opt-in. There's a little bit of a gray zone. You could say that it is necessary for your business to store UTM parameters in local storage or in a cookie, because you don't track the user, you're just tracking your campaign. That's possible, but then you need at least to outline this in the privacy notice and list these cookies or local storage within the necessary cookies of the cookie consent banner. It's a typical thing where people really struggle, and I've seen already authorities going into this and complaining company or giving companies a fine just because of creating profiles, even if it's not really a profile, but they're not being transparent to the user. And I think that's the most important thing, that we are transparent to the users in whatever we do with cookie consent management.
Yeah, so actually I sort of skipped a slide as well that I had. Like, my belief is also basically matching your that unless the company lawyer says otherwise, because it's still a law that is quite ambiguous, and I think a lot of companies with very big lawyer backup would argue very differently to us. But I do believe that users should not be tracked unless they agree to it, and we should allow them to opt out, and tags should not be fired unless it's users functionality. And yes, you can store these things in cookies or in local storage, but definitely should let users know in the policy. I think URL parameters, no one would really in fact mind. It's about being tracked without agreeing to it.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is what I find quite interesting, because I tend to go to the government websites to try to figure out whether they've applied the policies already. And .gov.uk site does not track you if you do not allow the cookies, but the French government website does with AT Internet. That's quite funny.
That's true. The thing here is also, if we talk about cookie consent, most times people refer to the GDPR and e-privacy, but you have to have in mind that there is the CCPA, or I think it's CPRA now called, from California, the second version. Brazil has its own version. South Korea has its own version. So you made a very strong comment in your presentation. Think about that the triggers are fired inside the EU and outside of the EU, but even outside of the EU, you have to think about in which countries you're doing this, which made us bringing the cookie content in every country. Wherever we have a website, we have the cookie content live and running, even if this means we have a lot of drop. But with this, we are more compliant. And thinking about we want to be transparent for the user. Why should I be transparent to a EU user and not to a US user? Doesn't make out of just from the idea of how I treat users, doesn't make sense, right? Yes, from an analytics perspective, makes sense because we want to have perhaps more data, but that's then another topic.
Yeah, actually, Igit mentioned that I don't, in the chat, I don't see the difference between session storage and URL parameters. I think the regulation actually doesn't say anything about the means that you store the information. It says if you record personal information. Yep. So it goes down to the definition of what is personal information, not quite how you necessarily store it.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think it's more different type of discussion.
Yeah, and the thing is, people are more used to use local storage or session storage or cookie than the URL parameter. And the other thing is, the URL parameter is at least a little bit more transparent than the session storage or local storage, which is not completely true, because the modern browsers nowadays try to hide query parameters and just show you the path and nothing behind. But in the end, the URL parameter is at least a little bit more transparent than everything else. Okay, let's go first for David.
Yeah, no, I was just checking the chat. I'm wondering if anyone else wants to join the discussion and jump on the stage or ask questions. Just raise your hand, or let's basically write in chat, and we'll make sure that you can be included in discussion, because for now it's just the two of us. Yeah. But yeah, if you want to come and just let us know when you can.
I wanted to make a comment on David's comment from before in the chat, where he said, typically the cookie content is brought on the website via a tag management system, while you have perhaps other things hard-coded which bring up cookies, and then you have really a problem. We see this also in our applications, especially if you work with payment providers. The payment provider is normally hard-coded, but sometimes they also try to track people. And so you have to figure out how you can block the cookies from the payment providers in your checkout to be compliant. So
yeah, I also find that so many companies now resort to use plugins from third parties to do stuff on their websites. You know, recommendation engines and chats, and so many website functionalities are based on tags and third parties, and you have to make sure that you know what's happening with that data, because they also drop tracking on your website sometimes. So yeah, it's getting a little bit tricky as well to manage it, and I find that quite a lot of companies are starting to get confused in their ecosystem of software and companies that they are working with, actually.
And it's yeah, true. And it should be a process, right? You shouldn't just start making your cookie content implementation and then say I'm done. It has to be a process where if everything new comes in, it has to be also in the cookie banner or in the cookie content management, let's say it like this, or scanning your website from time to time. Perhaps sometimes even a vendor just places a cookie without you knowing, like video libraries now tracking your videos without you knowing. So, and then you're directly uncompliant, and that's the biggest problem because you are reliable for your website. It's up to you. So if your vendor crashes your website with cookies, you get in jail, not the vendor.
Yeah, I think that is quite tricky. Then that's a nice part in a way for me to use actually a consent manager, because when the new cookies are dropped, I mean, they do regular checks and they do let you know. So that's another positive, I think, way to work with a third party, but you just have to make sure that that communication between that third party that is responsible for consent management and specifically cookies, because they mostly care about cookies. I called this presentation Cookie Consent Manager, which is a terrible word because it's not cookie manager, it's consent manager, but they normally don't deal with tags. So it puts a more pressure on analysts to actually upskill in the tag management and actually knowing how the tags are put, because what you've mentioned and what David mentioned, hard-coded tags are common actually. And people don't normally know how to check this because they just go GTM preview, and that's only GTM tags.
Yeah, exactly. Just making a short recommendation, or no, not recommendation, a short advertising. I will give a session after this one in the Commanders Act room about how to A/B test cookie banners. So if anyone is interested in this, what we did there, just come over to the Commanders Act room. But I think this, I really like that you brought up this topic, Monika, because I think many people are struggling, and I think we have so many things to do in this area. So we are not done yet.
Yeah, there's lots of questions actually in Q&A, so I'm just going to copy them and I will respond to them. There was no notification showing for us that there are questions in the Q&A. So I will copy them and try to approach these people separately, or maybe Till, if you are willing to spare 5 minutes of your session, we could talk about it then.
Sure. Let me give I will try to screenshot them so I can refer to them in the other session.
And I would be curious if anyone as well has the rates, what's the percentage drop off tracking as a result of implementing a cookie consent banner. For me, what I've seen is an average of 30% drop off, but I'd be curious what's the range, other people's opinions. Yeah.
Same here, 30% drop, but on a holistic level. So we've seen areas on the website where we have at least 90% of drop, and we have seen areas on the website where we perhaps have just 5% of drop. So it's really just an average.
Quite interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, I've not looked at other areas. I think we have only 1 minute left. So yeah, I will look at questions and I will try to answer them personally, approaching people, and maybe we can talk about them in Till's session as well later.
Thank you all. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
See you later.
See you later.